war that is happening right now as we talk in the Middle East. The United States and Israel attacked Iran, assassinated the supreme leader together with the commanders, and then we had the Iranian response. How do you see the situation right now between Iran and the United States and Israel on the other side?
Well, I think first of all, any war is just absolutely unpredictable, and I'll make some comments about that shortly. But if I had to make a very broad guess, underscore guess, what I think is going to be happening in the next maybe even few weeks, so probably mostly in the next week, but perhaps into 2 weeks, is the Israelis and the Americans are going to do tremendous damage to Iran, and it's going to be quite large and quite extensive, and they will have a difficult time sustaining it, though. And Iran will be, of course, striking back. And the Iranian strikes in return will take time to accumulate because the blitz from the Israel, the amount of munitions you can deliver from aircraft is enormous relative to what you can do in the form of ballistic missiles. It's just a tremendous amount of ordnance you can deliver. And you can deliver it with relatively high precision, unlike what the Iranians can do with ballistic missiles. So the initial shock to Iran will be very large. But as time goes on, the weight of pressures will move against the Israelis mostly, because I think the Iranians, as far as we can guess, I want to underscore we don't know this in for sure. The Iranians have a significant ability to deliver ballistic missile warheads to Israel. And even if it's simply hundreds of ballistic missile warheads, it could eventually be much larger than that. But initially, it might be limited to hundreds. This is going to take a tremendous toll on Israel, which is basically it's a pretty small country with a few urban areas, and those urban areas will be extremely vulnerable to continuous threat and damage from ballistic missiles falling on those areas. So it won't be a blitz of the kind that Iran is certainly reeling from now and will continue to suffer from over the next week or two. But it will be persistent and accumulating. So my guess is that over time, the Americans and the Israelis will not be able to sustain this assault. Simply, they will just run low on munitions. I mean, the Americans are already low on munitions. They gave a lot away to the Ukrainians, and the Americans do not have the surge capabilities that for example, the Russians have or the Chinese have. And this is something that the American extremists who want to fight wars everywhere do not seem to appreciate. We Americans, I don't want to be associated with this terrible war, but we Americans have a system of military support that depends on what I would call, I don't know, crony capitalism. Maybe I'll call it that. We have these military these companies, which are sucking at the tit of the U.S. government to build military systems and provide us with munitions. They are profit-making. When you're a profit-making company and your only objective is to make money, which is when you get away from all the flag waving these companies do, that's what they are. They're profit-making organizations and simply concerned about that. You do not build your manufacturing facilities beyond what your contracts will support, because having a big manufacturing facility costs a lot of capital, costs a lot of money. And so you size your facilities to be able to produce what your contracts and what you predict your contracts will give you a profit, a significant profit. So you don't have this very large expansion capability built into your systems, like, for example, the Russians have, or the Chinese would have, because they have a military system that is built to provide the country flexibility should there be a need, should there be a military need. I should say that as an American, I not supporting these wars of choice, incidentally, but as an American who has had concerns about a responsible American defense capability, I have for decades been screaming we should not privatize our military industries. When you privatize your military industry, the engineer who works for the big corporation works for the corporate head. So when the engineer finds a problem with something that they're foisting off on the American people, their loyalty is to the company leadership, not to the government. So if you're working in the government and you find a problem with a weapon system you're deploying, you immediately report it to the leadership of the country, and people are aware of the problems and they have at least some opportunity to go about correcting them. That's not the case in the American system. You have a profit-making organization that's loyal to the profits and not to the country's best interest, and we have that system here. So that results in a system that is highly inflexible. And I'll go through some numbers, production numbers, shortly with regard to air defenses that'll give you some sense. And that's really due to it's due to a lot of problems, but it's partly due to the lobbying for air defenses that competent engineers know or should know do not have the capacity to do what they claim they're going to do, both technically and in terms of numbers. And it also has to do with serious technical and science limitations that these air defenses face when they're particularly dealing with ballistic missiles. They do very well against aircraft, but they don't they have nearly no capacity against ballistic missiles. And I'll emphasize that later in our discussion. So we're in a situation where the air defenses of both Iran and Israel will play critical roles for both those countries. In the case of Iran, the air defenses that Iran has are relatively susceptible to suppression. This is true of all air defenses, unless you have a very capable Air Force to help you back up, to help you work against the air defenses of the other side. For example, we see in Ukraine that the Air Force of the Russian Air Force, plus, of course, the very clever use of drones to exhaust the Ukrainian Air Force, the Ukrainian ground defenses, has essentially resulted in the destruction of all the meaningful air defenses in Ukraine. And In Iran, we have a somewhat similar situation, even though the air defenses are reasonably capable as air defenses go. They are susceptible to attacks from the ground, special forces, and electronic countermeasures, and then direct attack from aircraft supported by electronic countermeasures. And I never expected the air defenses in Iran to work very well. They have a utility in forcing the American and the Israeli air forces to deal with them. So they have to use assets to suppress the air defenses. But once the air defenses have been mostly eliminated, you can go about your business without allowing them to cause any, sometimes it's called virtual attrition of your forces, because you have to use some part of your forces to constantly suppress and resuppress the air defense systems. And it looks like the expected outcome has already occurred in Iran, and the air defenses have been suppressed, or largely so. In Israel, we have also air defenses that are not functioning very well for different reasons. These air defenses are not working against aircraft, at least at the moment, and probably will not be working against aircraft, although they will be working against cruise missiles and drones later on. But they really have no effect, and I'll demonstrate. I'll show some slides again to reiterate this point. This is not me talking off the top of my head. I'll explain to your audience how to understand some of the images I'll be showing them. So I'll take some time to show them how to read the images, and then we'll go through those images. And we can see that the air defenses against ballistic missiles essentially are not functioning in Israel. So the amount of damage that can be done by ballistic missiles is much lower than what can be done by aircraft that are operating within their range with adequate air support, air refueling support. But the weight over time will take its toll, and that toll will be very significant and will have a very, very damaging effect on Israel's capability to sustain the function of its society. I don't think the society will collapse, as neither will Iran's society, but there will be enough disruption to basically cause the Israeli economy to go further into the deep hole it's already in. And the economy matters. I mean, you don't have to there are lots of ways to bring a country to a point where it decides it really doesn't want to continue under the conditions of war. And a collapsing economy is certainly going to have that effect. There are other effects that we will see later on as well. That is, the Iranians have closed the Strait of Hormuz. I'll have a few comments on that too. I'll explain what the straits look like, because I think it's one thing to say it, it's another thing for people to see it. I have some maps I'll show. And basically, it's going to have a tremendous effect, but not instantly. So, for example, 90% of the crude oil that Japan gets goes through the Straits of Hormuz, 90% of it. But Japan has maybe 230, 240 days of reserves because they know they're dependent on that crude oil. China, 40% of its crude oil goes through the strait, and it has 80 or 90 days of reserves. South Korea is, I have a little figure that I'll show later. So once we get into the 2 to 3 month period of this war, and it will go on because the Iranians, their objective, they have no choice if they're going to fight this as they've said they're going to do it, but to string the war out, to extend it, and to depend on the weight of the damage they are doing taking effect over time. So initially, we will see a tremendous amount of suffering and damage in Iran, and then we will see the accumulating effects of similar suffering and damage in Israel and other countries. And those other countries matter. You know, if you're doing damage to China's economy, China may have an interest in helping one party or the other, and it's clear that China has decided to help Iran, and Chinese help will come in the short term and in the long term. In the short term, the Chinese have provided satellite data to the Iranians. Now the Iranians can look and say, oh, there are lots of aircraft at this airfield and not that one, which we can reach. There's also, we can see what kind of damage we're doing to Israel. The Israelis can try to control the public discourse on this, but they're not going to hide it from the Iranians. And the Iranians are going to have a sense of how to concentrate their forces as the war goes on. This is not a minor thing. They look like just photographs, but this is a major, major capability that China is basically making available.
Sorry for interrupting you. We had the same case in the Red Sea, if you remember, with the Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea with Houthis. They have decided that they can let, Chinese and Russians and all these, they can pass, but they were selecting, those ships that are going to Israel, they're not going to pass. They're not going to.
Right.
They can be selective in that, in their attacks on any tanker in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, and if you think about how you're going to use your resources and focus them, even if your resources are limited, and I would be the first to tell you that ballistic missiles are limited in the amount of damage they can do. They just can't carry. They don't carry these enormous payloads that aircraft carry these days. But that over time, that doesn't matter because the effects of the kind we're already talking about will accumulate. And so Iran's strategy is sound based on the resources available to them. So each side is taking advantage of its strengths, and things are going to run out for the Americans and the Israelis. And so we're going to see a long war, and it's going to be unpredictable. Who knows what kinds of political, everyone's talking about the Iranian government collapsing. What's going to happen to Netanyahu when people start to really understand what he's done to Israel? And the Israeli population starts to say, well, I'm not sure I've had enough. I'm not sure I want more of this guy. Everyone's talking about the Iranians collapsing. Well, I don't know what's going to happen in Israel. I don't claim that at all, but I do have Israeli contacts, and they are not happy with the government. And there are a lot of other people who are happy with the government, but, seeing a little reality could change their minds. And so we don't know what's going to happen there as well. So it's a highly fluid, unpredictable situation. Anyway, why don't we just put on that first slide, mainly to guide me. I've already talked about the air defenses of both Iran and Israel and the effects. But let's go to slide 2, which is just announcing the next subject, which is closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is going to have its effects. If we go to slide 3, I put up some numbers that I think are relevant. So, for example, Japan, 80 to 90% of Japan's crude oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's no longer available. They do have 230 days of reserves. South Korea, 70%. These are giant economies. The United States is really dependent on these economies, so you talk about now, what I haven't put into is the effect on the American public of this war. Now, we are going to see, we Americans, we are, to put it bluntly, fat, dumb, and happy, and we tend to be very privileged, very insulated. But we're going to see the price of oil go up, of course, across the world, because the supply and demand is going to play a major role here. If the price of oil goes up across the world, the price of gas will go up in the United States, because our oil companies are not inclined to give charity to the American people. They're profit-making organizations, like our military industries. And they're going to raise the prices in the United States, because they're not going to sell oil products to the American people at a lower rate at a lower profit margin than they can get from international sales. So things are going to go badly in the United States. The American public is already very upset with what the American public correctly sees as rising inflation rates in the country. And we have a very distorted distribution of wealth in our country. It's kind of shocking. I mean, we are an enormously wealthy country, and I can't think of anything that I can want to buy that I can't buy if I choose to. But that's not true of a very large number of Americans. It shouldn't be true. Because the distribution of wealth could easily allow someone like me to continue living very well and have a lot, and have a very large, have the entire population live with the kind of dignity that people like me live with. It's not that we don't have enough. It's that we distribute it. It's such an unfair distribution of wealth. And So a lot of people are hurting very badly, and they're going to hurt more badly. It doesn't affect me whether the price of groceries go up much. I don't worry about that. But I can tell you that 60 or 70% of American families are in deep trouble with regard to these costs. And it's not that I don't care. I do care. But that has to do with the way the American government has prioritized the well-being of those of us who are richer relative to those of us who have less. Us, I mean Americans here. And the net result is Trump's big, beautiful bill gave people who have more money, even though they don't need it. Doesn't affect me. My personal life is not affected by changes in my immediate wealth. I can, it has, my disposable income is well beyond my needs, but that's not true of most people, and they are suffering badly. And I'm ashamed of this, by the way. I want to be very clear. This is not something I'm proud of. But these effects on the American economy are going to translate into votes. And the American Congress is up for voting in November of this year. And the polls already show that Trump and his Republican Party are in a lot of trouble. And if things go as they might go not only to lose the House of Representatives, but the Republicans could also lose the Senate. That's generally considered less likely, but I'm not so sure it's less likely, because I think as time goes on, things are going to get much worse from the point of view of re-election of Republicans. And Americans are going to react. And if the House goes Democratic, which I think is a near certainty, Trump is going to have a lot of problems. But if the House and Senate go Democratic, he's in big trouble. Because not only can he be impeached, although who knows how that would work out, but some of these criminals, and I mean, I'm not using this word, these criminals he has, like the head of Homeland Security and our Attorney General, who defy the laws and the Constitution of our country, they can be impeached too by the Congress. Right now we have a Congress that's not functioning. So Trump and his criminal supporters or members of his criminal cabinet are untouchable because the Congress is controlled by the Republicans now. But if that changes, life gets pretty difficult for these guys very fast. So, and that's one of the reasons why many people thought that he might actually not attack Iran, because by attacking Iran, he has really made the outcome even more certain and more likely to be deeply, deeply against them. But, this man cannot, he's never seen a violent opportunity he would turn away from. So we're now in this war. So we know that as time goes on, the effects of closing the strait is going to have catastrophic effects. And the question is, in some sense, what does it mean? Can the straits be opened, for example? Can the American Navy is extraordinarily powerful? Can they open the strait? If we look at the next slide, slide 4, I have this circle around the Strait of Hormuz, and basically it would be closed by mining it, putting mines, underwater mines out, so that tankers cannot pass through. Now, a typical tanker might carry a couple of million barrels of oil. Let's say a barrel of oil is $75. It won't be it'll be $100 a barrel, but $75. That's $150 million of revenue in the tanker. The tanker itself is probably worth 70 or 80 million to own it and build it. So you're talking a couple of $100 million, 250 million. Could even be $300 million a tanker. In terms of loss of a tanker. Nobody's going to insure that. So if you forget about these pie in the sky ideas that people like I would have, because I'm not responsible for anything, but if I'm the captain of one of those tankers or the owner of one of those tankers, I ain't going through the Strait of Hormuz. I don't care what you say. Now, the Iranians, if we look at the next slide, they have about 5,000 mines, 5,000 to 6,000 mines they can deploy. And really, there's no way of stopping them. They have these Russian Kilo-class submarines, but which can lay mines. These submarines don't have to use their torpedoes. They can lay mines. But my best guess is the midget submarines that the Iranians have both procured from North Korea and built on their own. I don't know the exact number, but it's well over 20. These submarines, 75 to 100 tons. They have a crew of 5 or 6. They could carry a couple of torpedoes, but they won't carry torpedoes. They'll carry mines. They travel quite slowly. They're shallow water submarines. They're diesel electric, which means that they're essentially can't be found in the noisy, shallow water of the strait. There's no acoustic systems that can find them. So they can be laying mines throughout whatever time interval that Iran wants to keep the straits closed. Now, you could try to remove the mines, but removing mines is an operation that generally will require surface ships. You might have some underwater robot vehicles, but they're not going to be able to do the job. They can't cover the area, the numbers. You can't put a surface ship out there under the guns of Iran. I mean, you're going to lose ships. There'll be a lot of casualties. So the U.S. Navy really doesn't have any options, as far as I can tell. If there's someone in the audience who can write me a note saying that I'm wrong, I'm always interested. But I don't see that there's any way that the U.S. Navy can clear those mines without losing assets and putting lots of assets at risk. So those straits are going to stay closed, and they're going to stay closed for a long time, essentially as long as the Iranians want those straits closed, unless you can mount some kind of campaign, which I don't think you're going to be able to do, to destroy those midget submarines while they're in ports going in and out and things like that. And that's going to be hard to do because that area of ocean is shallow. It belongs to Iran. It's not the deep water Navy where you go out and you get shot to pieces by the U.S. Navy. So things are going to be bad. If we just want to see how bad the situation is, slide 6 shows you, you see those little purple arrows. They show the right and left incoming and outgoing lanes for the deep water areas of the strait. The straits are only about 250 to 300 feet deep, which is enough for one of these big tankers, but